Yep,
That
that's good.
works.
That looks perfect.
Okay, great. Right. Well, yes, thanks again. And so I'm Mark Woodward, company's Nordic Energy. We work on renewable energy projects and the development of those projects across the country, and we've worked on European projects too, and we have ambitions to go wider than that, and you'll see how that fits in a while. But I'm a slightly peculiar character because inside our team, we have engineers and digital specialists and commercial expertise and people who've been in the renewable energy industry for many years. And I was a music teacher in my first job. I'm a violinist. I'm an improviser and a jazzer and so on. And I've had a very varied career, also being creating audio productions for radio commercials and products and so on. And then also I was a dreaded Ofsted inspector at one point, leading inspection teams across the country on that in the early days of inspection. Um, so I was a very peculiar character then because I was working with people who were largely prematurely retired, and I was coming in at my 30s and 40s, leading the teams, um, and then had the opportunity to move to where I live, which is a small holding on the edge of Sheffield and the Peak District. We are at 1,000 feet. If you know the geography of this part of the country, um, the Peak District descends rapido into Sheffield on the western side, so it's a short boundary. So my wife's a judge in the Crown Court, and she gets to work in 20 minutes. But meanwhile, we live in what people call the middle of nowhere, and we of course we're not in the middle of nowhere. But you go any other direction in Sheffield, you'd be in the middle of the suburbs. But in our particular direction, you end up on the edge of the peak. Um, and moved here uh, to a rather dilapidated farmhouse and barns setup. Leaky, 18th century, lots of leaks, air leaks, and an oil boiler that was probably about 30 years old and very unreliable. So we were cold and it was costing us a lot of money. And gave me more than a bit of food for thought. Um, and the consequence was I took a slightly different approach to oil and leaky 18th century farm building. And I spent 3 years working on the place with a agricultural contractor friend of mine nearby. Um, I was the person with the ideas about what we were going to do. I was then at the bottom of the food chain, mixing all the gobbo and ordering all of the different elements. And my friend Clive was the skilled person in the middle doing all the other work. Uh, with one exception, I trained as an electrician during this process, so I did the electrics. And the first thing was retrofit, underfloor heating, heat pumps. They all went in first. I was seduced by the heat pump coefficient of performance, 3 or 4 to 1. Remarkable technology, as you're probably all aware, that you put 1 unit of energy in and you get, depending on the technology and the circumstances, in the region of 3 to 4 units of energy out, which is fantastic, except that the energy that you need to put in is electricity, and electricity in the UK costs 4 times the price of gas. And this was something I hadn't, of course, this is a gap in my due diligence on project planning. Uh, at which point I thought, right, I better make some electricity. We've got some opportunities here with 10 acres of land. First thought was solar. We have a south-facing barn roof. £40,000 the quotation for a 4 kilowatt system in 2003, 4, generating about what they do now. The technology hasn't dramatically moved on, as again you're probably aware. So about 1,000 kilowatt hours a year per kilowatt installed. So getting for your 4 kilowatts, about 4,000 kilowatt hours. And of course, most of that comes in the summer when you need it least. So I thought, hold on, we have to perhaps need a different approach. And at 1,000 feet, then thought about wind technology. And uh, I did a postcode assessment, which was the primitive way that they did this, and it said we were marginal. And I said, no, we're not marginal. I know exactly. I can stand outside the door. I don't need to put an anemometer up to see what the wind speed is. I can feel it every time I walk outside the back door. So put up a proven 6 kilowatt turbine in 2005. And these are remarkable bits of kit. They were designed by a very smart character called Gordon Proven, Scott. And their simplicity itself, the blades were made out of plywood and a bit of fiberglass coating. And it's basically Faraday, it's just magnets and coils. And it generated spectacularly straight away, about 14,000 kilowatt hours a year. So it cost less to put up than the solar would have cost, uh, about 70% of the cost, and was generating 3.5 times more. It did 14,000 kilowatt hours. So suddenly we're onto a bit of a winner on this. This was all before subsidies and so on. So there were no subsidies on the heat pumps. So it was all before renewable heat incentive and all of these things. But of course, I've now proven that it can't, to coin a phrase, that the whole system worked, and subsequently put a 10 kilowatt turbine in 2011, and so a second turbine and a solar panels in the same year, a 4 kilowatt system that cost £16,500 then. So dramatically down in a decade from, less than a decade from the 40,000, but obviously significantly more than they cost now. So what you're seeing is some of that tech and a bit of a picture of where we are. The top left is the proven turbine. That's actually moved locations because unfortunately the neighbour next door decided he didn't like the turbine and planted a load of trees on the windward side. So it stopped it working, so I had to move it across the field. Such is life. These are the kind of things that test you. There are a lot of other things that tested too, because wind turbines are mechanical engineering and somewhat fragile until you've got the setup right. And we've got the setup right now, so they're not fragile anymore. But we had an awful lot of issues with particularly the Xeris turbine, which is in bottom right. The 10 kilowatt turbine is an American design, very innovative, fantastic piece of kit, but the setup wasn't right and they hadn't got the design absolutely nailed down. So we had a lot of breakdowns, and it took more than a decade to really get through all those and get everything sorted out. So things like we put two 6 kilowatt inverters to capture the 10 kilowatts. It actually generated right up to those 12 kilowatts, and we kept on having inverter failures because they'd be hitting their peaks. So we added in the last few years, we've added a third inverter, 6 kilowatt inverter. We've now got 18 kilowatts of inverter headroom with a 10 kilowatt turbine, and the difference has been substantial. We haven't had a breakdown since. And a lot of the other things have been adjusted to, like the different settings. So it's not an easy world, this. Things like solar is incredibly straightforward. there's no problem with solar unless you've got an incompetent installer. Um, yes, there are issues with perhaps, roof strength and so on, but fundamentally it's an easy technology and we've had zero maintenance on that and we've seen very little degradation in performance over 15 years. There are lots of stories. First started doing solar installs that there would be a need for replacement in 15 to 20 years. Well, it's certainly not our experience. I don't clean them because they're on top of one of the barn roofs, and you can see them there. It's very nice when you've got a bit of scaffolding there, which was when they were put up in the first place. But that's not sitting there, and I'm not going up on my ladders particularly. So, but again, I just haven't seen the degradation to justify it. If I'd seen that, then obviously I'd have had a different approach. And then bottom left are the two heat pumps. So they're down in the cellar. So we've got all the technology down in the cellar, and I monitor that uh, on a weekly basis. And I'm planning to put a digital recording system in for that and be able to publish that eventually. So real-time access, particularly for schools and so on, to actually be able to see, linked up to a weather station, see what the weather's like, see what the outputs of the technologies are, and so on. I think it'd be a useful piece of education opportunity. So uh, that is that side, and we happen to also grow our own fruit and veg, etc. As um, and produce an awful lot of our. I used to keep pigs as well. We keep chickens. I haven't got time to keep the pigs as well at the minute, but we'll go back to pigs eventually. I used to butcher them myself. I self-taught all that stuff, and we had a local abattoir that would do the killing for us, so they didn't have to go very far. And so we're not self-sufficient, but we don't have a problem when there is a problem in the food chain because we've got plenty in reserve, in either canned or frozen or actually sitting out in the veg plot that we can use at almost every time, every moment of the year. Um, so that's oh yes, and we have won. We won an international award on our install and so on. This was a few years ago. From Construction 21, a French-based company. Um, but I was working with this team on a European project at the time. They suggested of put in an entry, and we didn't actually win the category, but we came effectively second. And there's you can see where this is the layout of the farm. So that proven turbine is where my cursor is at the minute, and I've moved it across over here. And this is the auxiliary turbine, and there's the solar panels, and here's my veg plot. And we use the rest of the land for. We've got ponies and a livery, so it's grazing and so on. And then this is an orchard and a woodland area that we the Woodland Trust gave us some support with that. And we now have a charity called Kids Plant Trees that use this field now. They put up a field shelter and they do outreach work to inner city children to come and see what life in the countryside is all about, and obviously get an opportunity to see the other things that we do. So I don't get directly involved in that. I have done this kind of work because obviously with my teaching background, something I could very much do, but I'm pulled out with doing the Nordic Energy work. But we've effectively given them this field and they bring people up and they have a volunteer community working on this. This is just sort of really getting going at the moment. Um, so yeah, we're really pleased to be involved with that because it's also very much fits with our values as to how we're trying to offer community values as part of the work that we do. Um, Now I'm going to talk about the toolkit that we've developed. Um, uh, Perhaps first a little bit about Nordic Energy. We're a small company, four directors. I'm the business development. stakeholder engagement, sales, marketing lead. And then we've got specific expertise from the three other directors. Steve Hayes, who's the architect of what I'm going to show you on the digital tools. He's quite a brilliant person and able to design these tools and do the execution himself. But we've also got a team that we've employed behind this as well, courtesy of Innovate UK funding on what was called, because it's now over, Peterborough Accelerated Net Zero project. And that's how I met Gemma in PECT. And that's been an incredibly successful project on progressing renewable energy net zero projects inside the Peterborough area and then outreach beyond it too. You'll be aware that Innovate UK basically exists to give companies like ours a bit of a leg up at the early stage of development, which is very costly, particularly if you're employing people who have got very high level skills, which is what we've done. All the money pretty much that we got on grant funding went on people, not on kit. And then hopefully, we're right in the middle of launch period on this, where we've got to make money out of the thing that we've developed, because the grant funding has come to an end on that. But we have managed to create a commercially viable product, which is what I'm going to talk about with the toolkit. But the other two directors beyond Steve, well, Steve also worked for 10 years at Nottingham City Council on the renewable energy project side. So he's got a range of skills that obviously fit very well. Then then we have Bob Barnes, who worked for over a decade inside the energy consultancies and energy developers such as E.ON. And he creates outline business cases and full business cases that are much more intelligible to a range of stakeholders. So you look at the front end, as a layperson, you can work out what the commercial model's all about, whereas they are rather sort of intimidating looking at a commercial model when you're not familiar with it. But he makes the front end very visually clear, and then from there, obviously, you've got the detail and the complexity that sits behind it. But what he does, for the toolkit, we can create technical designs and integrated business cases in minutes for different projects. So what we're trying to do is save the public purse money, because feasibility studies cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. And the procurement period is lengthy, so people take a long time to work out what they're going to do and agree who's going to do it. They then produce a written report that costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to produce, and by the time it's published and people have decided they might want to do with something, it's out of date. And what we're trying to do is accelerate that whole early stage process to make it a more transparent and more adaptable. So as circumstances change, you can change the details, the technical details, the commercial details, and move the whole thing on much more rapidly and at much less cost. And our fourth director is a guy called Darryl Pope. He has worked at senior level in utilities, so he was on the board at Anglian Water. And I first worked with him where he was the owner's engineer for a major international investor for two biomass power plants, one in Rotherham, one in Kent. And he was simultaneously leading the construction of those, or at least the oversight of the construction for the investor, to make sure things were done on cost and on time. So as a business, we're creating the opportunity to go from early stage opportunity identification at speed and at low cost into sophisticated project delivery. But rather than concentrate on all those bits, I'll just show you the toolkits. I think you'll find this most interesting. We've developed this toolkit we've developed has got three tools: Loki, Odin, and Thor. Uh, the Loki tool, the one that we've got on the screen at the minute, is actually one that wasn't developed through the Innovate UK program. We've developed it in the last 6 months for another project that we're working on with the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. And this is a very early project identification tool. And this is something that might be of interest to you as collectively, because what it does is on a 3D map, and this is obviously just a flat screenshot, but on a 3D map, it enables you to have a look round and see what technology opportunities there might be in different locations. And to support that, on the left-hand side, you will see that there are different numbers and a menu of different things. If it was fully exposed, you'd see things like AD, solar, wind, and different elements of those types of projects in a menu of layers. And they're all GIS layers, Geographical Information System layers, that give intel across the whole of that area. So you can just turn those layers on and off depending on what you want to look at, whether it's solar gain or whether it's wind speeds or geothermal. I say we've got all the AD plants mapped across this area, all the energy from waste plants, the ones that are pending, etc., etc. Hydro, so we've mapped the rivers, and we know the flow rates of all the rivers at all the different location points, and the drop points. So where you might have an escarpment or something that could be potentially useful from a wind a water hydro harvesting electricity harvesting program. So what we've done with this is that all those stars that you can see on the map are project ideas points that we identified as effectively a long list for the combined authority as what we saw as potential opportunities for different technologies. Now, within those, people can go in and put their comments about those. So we've given access to the map to people like heads of planning, heads of highways, asset management, investment boards, and so on for the combined authority. So literally people can go in, instead of putting a report in, they can click on a project location. The head of planning might say, hold on a minute, you can't go there because we put a moratorium on planning in that area 2 years ago, and we can't go outside that for another 4 years or something. So, obviously that knocks that project out, if that's the case, immediately. So you don't waste a lot of time chasing things that are not going to be viable from the outset. And meanwhile, you can put useful things in that says, well, this looks like a good opportunity. The potential for this is this. Things you need to consider are land ownership, for example. We actually have on this map the land that's owned by the different councils that we can bring up as layers, but then a lot of it's privately owned land and so on that we don't have inbuilt because there's a cost to that from the land registry. But the detail like that can all be added, and then you can start putting together a picture, and then all the stakeholders in the project can see what's going on in that particular location. And this project will run for 8 months. We started standing start in January. Long list of nearly 50 projects has been completed. We're down to 23 for feasibility studies, and we will do 23 feasibility studies by the end of August. Now, typically a feasibility study for, say, a heat network will cost you somewhere between 70 and 100 and some £1,000 for one study in a written report. We're doing 23 in a digital format that are editable and so on in substantially less time. So this is where we're trying to add the value. And our Odin tool enables us to create technical and commercial feasibility studies in minutes for different types of projects. There's a bit of a screenshot of a rooftop solar project. Um, but we do um, car parks and ground mounts and wind and EV charging and a retrofit module. These all work slightly differently. And I'll take you through that in a moment. And seamlessly, you can export the data from that technical uh, and feasibility study. And actually, let's just go back to that. Did I? Where are we? If you see uh, here on the Odin module, you can see it's a bit unclear on this screenshot, but there are some high level metrics around that. And then you can click onto it and see the technical design parameters and the commercial outputs as well. It creates a business case straight away, and I'll demo that. That's probably the easiest way of doing that. And then going out into the Thor tool, which is a project guide. So it takes you through the different stages that you need to go through to develop a project, to do the early stage design, and potentially through to later stage design as well. And there's a checklist, and it will sort of log the progress that you're making against doing all the different tasks that you need to do under all the different sections. So it includes this technology and finance and stakeholder engagement and so on. So obviously, a lot of the people that work in the public sector, they're not infrastructure delivery people. They have a wide remit of tasks. So the purpose of this tool, this is from particularly from Steve's hard-earned experience in a local authority of trying to manage complex tasks across different areas of work. Having something that actually steers you through that process is proving very valuable. It's a very seamless process to move from one to the other. Excuse me. So those are the tools. And if I just come out of that and then where are we? Are we into? Oh, we're in Zoom. Right. This is into our Odin. Ah, am I not sharing anymore?
You stopped sharing just a few seconds ago,
Ah, okay.
Mark. So just
Let me
remember
just.
turn it back on.
Hopefully this should. Yeah, yeah. I just changed the window and it decided it was going to come out the whole thing. So this is into our Odin tool, and this is Peterborough. This works very much like Google Earth, and we can zoom in on different areas. These light green areas are actually the heat network zones. I won't go into what all that's about. There's a major shift in government policy on heat network, making heat networks more accessible. And this is one of the things, and it's something that we've actually been working on. And so this is a zone, and it makes it easier to sort of demonstrate what I'm going to do. And what we can do here is this happens to be that's if I just click on that, that's Peterborough City Hospital. So it's on a major heat demand. So that makes that a very attractive kind of anchor load, as we call them, or a heat network in that location that would include other buildings. So you can see I've just clicked on the building and I've got some early stage information about the energy demand of that building. This is all layers that are built into the modeling. Um, Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this area and select the buildings in that zone. And then I'm going to put a filter of 100 megawatt hours because connecting individual homes to a heat network is a bit of a challenge commercially. It's expensive doing all those connections, and for the income that you get from people paying their bills, it doesn't tend to work at the moment. And so what we've done there is we've got rid of all the smaller heat loads and we've just left with the major buildings. You'll see from the top row there's 39 buildings there with a peak demand of 14 megawatts. So we need to go into the settings and make sure we got enough capacity there. So on the primary heat, I'm going to lift that to, well, I'll lift it to 15 actually, 15 megawatts. You can see different plant types here. So we got recovered heat, we'll keep it at that, with a backup secondary plant air source heat pump. And then in dire straits, when everything goes, perhaps all the electricity goes down in the network, you might still need to have gas boilers as an emergency, particularly if you've got a hospital on your network, for example. So you've got a certain amount of capacity then as resilience, and then you can see some other things that we've built into the modeling for the commercials, etc. But that gives us the capacity. Now I just need to set up a source of heat, and I'm going to put it there. You can see we get tips on the model that shows you what's going on and what you might want to do next. So I've got a heat source next to that building, and then it's going to connect all these up, and all I have to do is press play. And now the tool will work out the most commercially effective way of connecting up those selected buildings, those 39 buildings, into a heat network. And at the same time, it will work out things like pipe sizing, and it will produce a commercial model. And it's done it. So in the time we've just been watching there, now what I will do to make it a bit more easy to see, I'm going to turn the zoning layer off. I might just turn the building layer off as well.
Mark, I'm so sorry. Can I just interrupt and ask?
Yep.
Just to be clear, I'm not sure I've understood. The heat network is entirely hot water, is it?
Yes.
Okay, and so there's no electricity. You're not generating electricity.
You're not generating electricity. No, this is a heat. This is
Okay.
for provision of heat. So,
Thank you.
yeah, and this is one of the big challenge on decarbonisation, because we're actually quite good at decarbonising electricity. Obviously, there's a long way to go to get full capacity, but we're generating at times. You're probably aware that sometimes we've been fully powered by renewable energy in the UK, and on average we're about 50% approximately across the year. So that's quite good. There are complexities to that, calculation. But heat is a nightmare because we have gone down the route quite logically over time of being gas dependent. We had our own gas, we still have our own gas. And gas is therefore very cheap. 85–90% of all heating is provided by gas. And so the transition away from that is staggeringly difficult.
Yeah. So Loki, Odin, and Thor just deal with the heat network, the water heat network.
No. They do with
They can do it
all sorts of any technology. I'm just demonstrating a heat network.
Thank you so much. Sorry to.
That's right. No, that's all right. So yeah, I could have demonstrated any one of those other technologies that were on the list on one of the slides.
Right.
Solar car parks, rooftops, or ground mount, or wind, or whatever. So if we just move in here, so you can see that the modeling that we do, I say it's 3D interactive, so you can search the site. So if you're trying to sort of explain to a stakeholder, somebody or person in the community, what you're suggesting might take place, then this enables you to do it. And this is the pipe routing. If you click on a length of pipe, that particular length of pipe there serves, let's do it again, 2 connections, and it would cost about 150,000 to the capital cost of digging that particular individual just length of pipe in. It'd be about 100. It'd be 100 milli diameter, and it's 92 meters hard dig length. Hard dig means typically you're digging up the roads rather than you can go through a field or some scrub or something like that. Obviously, soft dig is much cheaper, but there's very few areas of soft dig available for something like this. But the point really is just to show you the information that you can build around this. And then this is an overview of how that project looks, and it summarizes the pipes that are involved, and it gives you some core commercial metrics, which are summarized also in this box here. So the total capital cost of that network is 47 million. The IRR is 7.2, which if you're familiar with things like that, that's a pretty decent IRR, particularly for a public project. Not necessarily good enough for a lot of private investors, but it's very promising on a public sector project. That, and the net present value, another economic indicator, 22.1 million. So it looks quite promising, this. And then you got a 50-year overview of the modeling and so on. And sitting behind that is a very detailed. Oh, well, let's see if we can do this without losing the screen. Oh, it's popped up. Hopefully you'll still be able to see this. And this is the full commercial analysis behind this. And you got all the connections detailed, the addresses, the heat demand, the peak demand, all the different commercial output. This is the complexity of these models, and then some view of the cost of electricity, gas, and whatever other technologies that are relevant to the going forward, and then the summary information, as I say, that is much more user friendly at the front end of this. So I'll just go back to the map. So I'm just, and then we connect. Well, let me just, what did I call this? Mark 89765. Let's get rid of that. Let's, where are we? Let's go back to the project. Mark, let's find that one. 89765. Go to the 3 dots, export to Thor. And this will automatically take through to the Thor tool, and I click on the technology side, and this is your project management planner. So yeah, let's see, risk assessment. So if you got to talk to about the risk assessment, community engagement officer, construction manager, and so on, what have you got to do? Identify potential risks, technical, financial, legal, environmental, assess the likelihood and impact of each risk, prioritize risks. So as you work your way through these, you can check these off, and then in your project progress, you're tracking all that through. And you do this under different headings. So on the finance, all these things we've got to look at. So funding and financing, grant applications. For a heat network, prepare a green heat network fund application. And again, you tick something off, and then it appears in the project plan. So the whole toolkit, I'll stop sharing there, is about very quickly taking you from opportunity identification of different technologies, solar, winds, heat networks, etc. And on the Loki tool, we've gone a lot further. We haven't modeled all of those into Odin and Thor yet, but things like AD, energy from waste, etc. So strategically, you can then sort of whiz through that process and speed up the development of projects dramatically. Right, I've gone on a mighty long time, and I've exceeded Graham's allowed presentation time. But I thought you might be interested in seeing, how those tools particularly work. So, any questions, Tristram?
Absolutely amazing. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. Have you got the data for everywhere in the country in those tools, or if we did it in North Hampshire, how does that work?
Yes. Well, right. Two different things there. Some of the data sets are just publicly available, and we've just inbuilt those into the model. The main source of information in the model that you've seen is OS data, Ordnance Survey data.
Mm-hmm.
That is free to local authorities and public bodies, and therefore the tool runs on OS data in that domain very comfortably. If we're working with a private sector partner, they have to pay for the data from OS. we are developing our own system, which we've actually developed it, but we haven't integrated it into the model yet. And this is to enable us to provide a free access to private sector partners to at least the headline data, because there's a lot of fragility around this data. You know, the OS data, it's if you look at it across a region, super good. If you look at it at an individual building or whatever level, there's probably all sorts of things that are wrong with it. And so built into the model, we also have the option or ability to change the data as you get real data in to replace the kind of first phase data. The point about what we're doing with this whole country set data sets is to give a quick picture, as you've seen, and say, is this likely to work or is it not likely to? Are we completely going up the wrong tree here because for various factors? Is it, you know, is this going to be really hard work?
Wonderful.
And then start modifying it, you know, and then you try different tricks. There's something they call sensitivity analysis. So, you know, say that hadn't worked, I could have turned some buildings off, turned some other buildings on, or extended the range of the network, press play, change some of the parameters to increase the heat, you know, supply or something. Press play again. It would give them another minute. It would have recalculated everything. Brand new business case, brand new design, etc. And you can then start comparing. You know, the one might be better, it might be worse. You can say, hold on, this is the direct. That looks like a good way of doing it. If we've got to try to improve it, and it works, you know, well in that situation, etc., etc. So it's very flexible, but at the entry level end, you get that picture because the data sets are built in that are largely freely available.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I hope to be able to contact you after this meeting to have a further discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'll send Graham the presentation, so and then I've got my email address, I think, on that. I'll double check that I put that. Yeah.
Thank you,
Graham.
So, Mark, thank you so much for that. I thought that was utterly fascinating, ranging from your own private farm and up to most of the country.
It's the only way I get credibility because I haven't got the skills of all my colleagues. So
can I go back to your home installation?
Yes. Yeah.
You were talking about things to do before you started putting things in. Did that include putting in underground loops for the heat pumps? Presumably they're pumping water around, are they?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it's a ground source heat pump. So my mate with lots of, you know, his multiple skills was able to trench our hayfield, and we've got 1.25 kilometers of 40 mil pipe buried in 5 loops underneath that field.
Wow.
That then feed into 50 mil pipes that go into the cellar and feed the heat pumps.
Okay. And then the next question is that you had 2 turbines and one was quite a distance from the house.
Yeah.
How about cables? Did you have to run the cables from there?
So we trenched all the cable, and then had to calculate the voltage drop, etc., to get the right diameter cable. So it's all armored cable, obviously.
I'm beginning to
Trenched
see
in
why
at the
you
right depth.
I'm beginning to see why you took an electrician's course in the middle of all this.
Yes, quite. Yes.
You haven't mentioned batteries at all, Mark.
We've got a Tesla battery. That was a addition about 7 or 8 years ago. It's very good indeed, but it only stores 14 kilowatt hours of electricity.
Yeah.
Now, in most people's circumstances, that's quite a lot of electricity because that would probably be more than a day's worth of demand. But if you're running heat pumps in the middle of winter, that might only run for a couple of hours in keeping the heat pumps going. So it does give us some resilience, but it's a pretty expensive piece of kit for the resilience that it gives us. That was £10,000. They've come down a bit. So I think they're being sold at about 8,000 now, but it's a lot of money.
We had a few discussions about that here recently, and people are suggesting that if you get electric vehicles that have been written off by the insurance company, their
Yeah.
batteries are often very much more cheaply available and actually
Yeah.
huge capacity.
Yeah.
So I just throw that in for
Yeah,
people if they want to.
that might be a direction of travel.
Well, I
Obviously,
think I was given something like £400 for a 60 kilowatt hour installation, which is very lovely compared to the 10,000 that
oh,
Tesla would.
absolutely, yes, absolutely. I mean, I
Can I,
cannot advise on the technical complexity of that, but
yeah, can I change directions now,
yeah.
Mark? Who do you see as the potential target audience for your toolkit?
Um,
Because I can see how
yeah.
it would certainly interest people at the parish level, but you're probably more aiming at the county or district level.
Um,
And is it priced
we're yes,
accordingly?
we're it yeah. It is more to do with those kind of levels. Yes. The pricing model is probably out of the reach of parish councils at the moment, the way we're doing things. But then we are open to, if, for example, there's a piece of work associated with it and it's a localized project, then we are open to different ways of working with people.
Yeah, I'm aware of one software company that prices its products on the size of the parish. So if you're a
Yeah,
large parish, you pay quite a lot more than the small
yes,
parishes.
yeah.
But
We don't do that at the moment. We're just going into this commercial arena, and what we're not, and we're very clear about this, we are not a software as a service
no,
provider. We are a team of energy experts that happen to use
yeah,
very
you just bring the
clever
toolkit.
tools.
Yeah,
Um, and so our revenue model, business model is around doing that because
yeah,
as we're talking about, some of the things we've talked about in this conversation illustrate the complexity of these things. You might have a piece of software, but it doesn't necessarily solve your problem.
funny
So,
enough, I had
yeah,
exactly the same issue when I was starting my first company back in '89. But do we sell the toolkit or do we bring the toolkit as part of our consultancy?
yes,
And we
okay,
went with we'll take it as part of our consultancy.
yeah,
Anyway, thank you very much. It's a big help. Moving on to Peter perhaps now.
yeah, Peter,
Yeah, yes, Mark. Actually, I started off with two questions. Now I've got three questions related to what was you just said to Graham.
yeah,
In terms of the software, I mean, I suspect um, it would be if it was going to be used, it would generally at parish level be used as a one-off thing. Yeah, there is
yeah,
it is sounds to me as if it's going to be either you buy it as a one-off package, or it may well be that a district or a county level may buy it as a package there. So yeah, that's my kind of feeling on that point.
yeah. I mean, that's right, and being quite frank with you, we haven't worked out the kind of the more sort of diversified way of approaching the market with that. I think perhaps, hopefully, you've got some impression about our commitment to wanting to work with communities and the public sector to increase value and so on. So, if, for example, we were also engaged to help work on the project, so there's a revenue stream associated with developing the project as a sort of consultancy basis, then maybe the tool would just be incidental, as it were,
Yeah.
because you don't want a kind of regional or city-based or national coverage. It's completely irrelevant. So I think we would take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, the same question is how can you guarantee the accuracy of the costs that have been put into the system?
We can't. Uh, so we don't say that this will give you a cast iron guarantee. The point about this is the first the there would be a point that we could, if we got up to REBA 4 standard, if you're using the kind of build benchmarks and so on that go to a standardization. So REBA 4 would be, if you're familiar with the REBA, so it's what is it? Royal Institute of Architects, something or other architects, but it's the standard that's used certainly across the UK. And so saying, well, what level do you need to get in terms of design and preparation ready to go out to procurement for a construction project? Now, what I've demonstrated to you is more REBA 1, 2. It's the early opportunity framing and saying, is this in the ballpark? And you heard me explain to Graham that, the data sets that we're using here are not, they're not nailed on either. They're publicly available national data sets, but the accuracy of their information is not guaranteed either. It can't be. Only when you've got real information. And then typically when you get to REBA 4 standard, you've got real information about the important elements for the design, all the components, and then you can input those into a detailed design which gets signed off at REBA 4 level, at which point there's a degree of accountability with some caveats, because you're not in control of all the factors, but you're much more in control. The factors that you can control in terms of that, knowledge of how much different parts cost, the pumps cost and all the rest of it. There can still be issues on the dig, because until you put a spade in the ground, you don't quite know what you're going to find underneath, despite the ground, surveys that you can do from the top before you stick anything in the ground. But there are some uncertainties that are accepted within construction projects that you can't be accountable for in design. But it all depends on how far you go up the chain.
Right. And question 3 is actually relating to be able to do cost comparisons of the different types of technology. For example, I know not too far away from me, there is a village with a heat network system.
Yeah.
Okay, it was an early pioneer, but it cost a horrendous amount. And if in fact individual homes had actually been connected up, the cost could have been a lot different.
Yeah.
And then the key question is your tool got the capability of being able to do those cost comparisons? Is it cheaper to do
Yeah.
in the home separately, or is it cheaper to put a
Yes.
network in?
And typically we find that in rural situations and pure even in city situations, excuse me, connecting to a heat network is very difficult to get to work commercially for a home. Whereas a heat pump, and particularly with costs that have fallen down to some degree of subsidy, can be much more cost effective. And our approach to say retrofit is a cost optimized solution, not necessarily going to the energy sprung, where you've virtually got no energy costs. It is a sort of a kind of a what's the most sensible intervention to put in here that is least disruptive to the homeowner and gets you the best cost metric. So the whole basis of our retrofit module in the Odin tool is looking at that. So what would be the implications of deep retrofit, optimized, or do nothing at all? So you can do an immediate look at that cost comparison.
Okay, yeah. So in fact, you could actually, because there's a lot of hype about heat networks, and the reality is, are they how viable they actually are, and also you have to consider the disruptive aspect of heat networks.
Yeah.
In that respect. So those
yeah, they're important. But remember as well, if the whole street filled up with heat pumps and EV chargers, for example, and we've got a very fragile grid, unless you're factoring in the costs of upgrading the grid and so on, which is mega cost. These commercial models require interpretation, shall we say?
So again, going back to the data input,
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
you have a data set that actually looks at how
Yeah.
fragile the electricity network is?
Yes. You can change those numbers as it stands at the minute. Yeah, you can and rerun the model depending on. So those assumptions are challengeable all the way through. So looking at that's really important.
But the key thing is that data has to be obtained by the user because it's not available. Well, a set is available from you, but the user would have to have the option would have the option
Yeah.
to change it, but would also need to know where to get that data from.
Yeah. Although we obviously we know a lot about getting older data, but then that becomes into the consultancy work rather than it's just tuned. The capability of changing it's in the model, but what it should be changed to and from are dependent on circumstance. So
Yeah,
yeah,
which leads on to the tool being useful for a consultant rather than being a tool useful for a local community, for example.
it depends. Again, you could get your first idea, but you'd have you wouldn't rely on you wouldn't just press play and say, there's the answer, because it wouldn't be. No, it would give you a steer as to whether you're going in the right direction or not.
So how much does it cost to get a steer?
Well, again, circumstance by circumstance, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Peter, can I
Yeah.
suggest if you want to go into further detail, you do it with Mark directly because I'm
Sure.
conscious of the time and there are other
Yeah.
people with questions. So perhaps we could move on to Lynn, please.
Yeah. Hi, Lynn. Sorry keeping you waiting.
No, fine. It's probably just a quick one. I'm just aware with the climate adaptation report that came out a couple of weeks ago, the kind of requirement, particularly for vulnerable communities, to need air conditioning, so such as hospitals and care homes.
Yeah.
Is there an ability to look at future needs and include those in the model?
Yeah. Yes, they would need to be, added to it, and we're continually developing the model to meet different circumstances.
Okay.
So
Because I guess,
it's not
yeah.
there at the moment, if you like.
Yeah. I'm just thinking in terms of kind of future planning from a local authority point of view, looking at future load and therefore future costs and cost savings, that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, the whole basis of social value metrics that we put into the retrofit model, because this all goes to this same kind of point, is actually it's the health benefits,
yeah.
and some of the NHS work that's been done on monetizing, if you like, putting some value to be able to include in commercial modeling for schemes. Then we've derived a lot of intel from that in helping to then present things like retrofit in the most realistic light for its benefits, because these things are obviously hard to get that sort of monetary value around. It is critical. It's one of my big beefs about. I talk to a lot of financial modelers all the time, and they're often quite simple souls. The numbers speak for themselves actually, but the human life is much more complicated, and it changes day by day. So that's the benefit of having the digital tool that is adjustable. So you can then interrogate that. So what happened if, and what if we valued that at this? How would then that look as an investable priority, particularly when you've got things like those schemes that are going to be requirements, and therefore that makes it more investable when there's a requirement to deliver something.
Yeah. And it feels like if it could be factored in at planning stage in terms of kind of future loads and requirements, um, then I guess kind of reducing costs and impact all round.
Yeah.
But is that harder because the data's you're kind of having to plan everything's, I suppose everything's kind of a kind of prediction rather than, I mean, I suppose
Yes.
it's a prediction
Yeah.
anyway,
No,
but
it is.
from a retrofitting point of view, everything's more costly and harder, and
Yes.
you can do things at the beginning
Yes.
that would
No,
help.
well, that's exactly it. That's why I say on the retrofit model, we do present things in that kind of way so that it gives you a picture as if you were to do X. If you do, say, the really deep retrofit, well, the capital cost would be Y, and the benefits be this, and the disruption would be this, etc. So it gives you a shape to the dialogue around the different options. And then, yes, you're right. There could be other factors, and there will be other factors that you'll need to integrate to get a deeper picture. Now, unfortunately, that then just begs questions, doesn't it? Because that is not the easy answer. It's not like, if I do that, that'll solve the problem. If I put a battery in, that'll crack it. It doesn't, it's not, it
Mm,
isn't that simple. But the more that we do, the more we learn about the kind of the tolerances around an intervention that can make things a better choice.
yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mark, the Lynn's question prompted another question in my mind, which is that ratio you gave of something like 3 to 1 for the amount of energy you get out of a heat pump for putting
Yeah,
it in.
yeah,
Does that apply for both heat and cool? If we're all going to need air conditioning in the future, can the heat pump do it
yeah.
for us?
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that, Graham. I don't know. I've been very focused on heat pumps with the heat rather than because obviously they're reversible, or some of them are, because it's as yeah, you'll be familiar. It's fridge technology effectively. So on one side you get heat, the other side you get cooling.
We put air heat pumps into our village hall, and they were extremely effective at cooling the place as well as at heating it. Very good.
Right, yeah.
But I just
Which,
wondered if there were
yeah,
numbers to support that.
I
Okay.
don't know, I'm afraid, but that's a very interesting point. Um, yeah, as to actually what the real numbers are against that. Yeah.
Okay, well, acting on the formula that you should always leave the provider with a complete question to go off and muse over. Let me ask if anybody else has got any questions they'd like to put, please, to Mark before we go. But obviously
Got
not.
your hand up, Lynn. I don't know whether. Oh no, it's come down again. Okay.
Yes. Um,
Yeah.
Mark, that was fascinating. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. And
Good.
uh, you might be interested to know that next week the speaker is going to be from an organization called Green Isle of Wight, which
Oh
is
yeah.
doing virtual power stations and virtual use of your batteries and solar cells. So I'm looking forward to that as
Oh, that'd
well.
be interesting. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much.
You're
And
very welcome, and very happy to take some questions. And I'll send you that brief presentation,
yeah,
Graham.
if you
So
would please, and
then
we'll
it's
publish it
got
on the
my email address on.
yeah, and we'll publish it on the knowledge base. Thank you. So
Great.
thanks all for your time. See you next week and take
Yeah,
care. Bye bye.
very
Thank you
good.
very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thanks all.